In the 10th century, Ethelred the Unready, an Anglo-Saxon king, sought to strengthen his position by marrying Emma of Normandy, daughter of the Duke of Normandy. This marriage was meant to secure an alliance between England and Normandy, solidifying the English king's connection to their Norman neighbors. But Ethelred's reign was fraught with conflict, and the Viking invasions of the early 11th century, led by King Sweyn Forkbeard of Denmark and later his son Knut, resulted in a temporary loss of the English throne. After years of struggle, Ethelred's son, Edward the Confessor, was restored to the throne in 1042. Edward had spent years in exile in Normandy, forming deep ties with the Norman court. Edward ruled England for over 2 decades but died in January 1066 without an heir, sparking a succession crisis that would ultimately lead to the Norman invasion. Edward's death in 1066 set off a chain of events that would change the course of English history forever. The Anglo-Saxon Witenagemot, a council of nobles, elected Harold Godwinson, a powerful English earl, as the next king. Harold was a capable leader and had long been one of Edward's most trusted advisors. However, his claim to the throne was not universally accepted. 3 other men believed they had a rightful claim to the English crown: William, Duke of Normandy, Harold Hardrada, King of Norway, and Edgar the Atheling, the last surviving male member of the Anglo-Saxon royal line. Each would soon make their move to seize the throne. William's claim was rooted in his relationship with Edward the Confessor. As Edward had spent much of his life in Normandy, he and William had developed a close relationship. William claimed that Edward had promised him the English crown, and to add weight to his claim, he pointed to his marriage to Matilda of Flanders, whose noble lineage connected her to the English royal family through Ethelred's marriage to Emma of Normandy. Harold Hardrada, on the other hand, based his claim on a treaty between the former Danish and Norwegian kings. According to this agreement, if either king died without an heir, the other would inherit his lands. Harold, seeing England as part of this agreement, launched his invasion from the north. In September 1066, Harold Hardrada sailed across the North Sea with a force of approximately 10,000 men. He landed in the north of England, joined by Tostig Godwinson, Harold's exiled brother who had been conspiring against him. Harold's army quickly captured York, the largest city in northern England, and began preparing for further advances. Harold Godwinson, now king, was forced to act quickly. He raised an army and marched north, covering the nearly 200 miles between London and York in a matter of days. On September 25th, Harold's forces confronted Harold's army at Stamford Bridge. The battle was fierce and brutal. The Norwegians, caught off guard, were forced to fight without their full armor, having left it behind at their ships. Despite this disadvantage, they fought valiantly, and the English army struggled to break through their ranks. At one point, a lone Norwegian warrior famously held off the entire English army at a narrow bridge, allowing his comrades to regroup. Eventually, however, the English overwhelmed the Norwegians, and both Harold Hardrada and Tostig were killed in battle. The Norwegian invasion had been crushed, but at a great cost to Harold's army. Barely had Harold tasted victory when news arrived that William of Normandy had landed on the southern coast of England. On September 28, 1066, after weeks of delay due to bad weather, William's invasion fleet arrived at Pevensey Bay. William had assembled a massive force, estimated to be around 7,000 men, including infantry, cavalry, and archers, supported by a fleet of 600 ships. William's army began pillaging the surrounding countryside, drawing Harold south to confront him. Harold, determined to stop William before he could gain a foothold, made the fateful decision to march his army, already exhausted from the battle at Stamford Bridge, directly to meet the Normans. On October 14, 1066, the 2 armies met near Hastings at Senlac Hill. Harold's forces, numbering around 7,000 men, took up a defensive position on the hill, forming a shield wall. William's army, made up of a combination of Norman knights, Breton infantry, and Flemish mercenaries, faced an uphill battle. The Battle of Hastings would prove to be one of the most pivotal moments in English history. William's strategy was to break the English shield wall with waves of archers, infantry, and cavalry. However, the battle did not go according to plan. At the outset, William's archers fired volleys of arrows at the English, but due to the steep incline and the protection offered by the shield wall, the arrows had little effect. Next, William sent his infantry to assault the English lines, but they too were repelled by the steadfast Anglo-Saxon defense. Finally, William unleashed his cavalry, but they struggled to ascend the hill and were met with fierce resistance from the English, wielding axes and swords. At one point, the Norman left flank began to falter, and rumors spread that William had been killed. Sensing victory, a portion of the English forces broke ranks and charged down the hill in pursuit of the retreating Normans. This proved to be a fatal mistake. William, who was very much alive, removed his helmet to show his troops that he was still in command and rallied his forces for a counterattack. As the English soldiers who had broken ranks chased the fleeing Normans, William's cavalry turned and surrounded them, cutting them down. This tactic, known as the feigned retreat, was used several times throughout the battle, each time drawing more English soldiers away from the shield wall and into the open, where they were vulnerable to cavalry attacks. The battle raged for hours, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. But as the day wore on, the English forces, still weary from their march and the battle at Stamford Bridge, began to tire. Late in the afternoon, an arrow struck Harold Godwinson in the eye, killing him instantly. His death demoralized the English army, and without their leader, the shield wall finally broke. William's forces seized the opportunity, launching a final devastating assault that routed the remaining English forces. With Harold dead and his army defeated, William began his march towards London. Although he encountered resistance from local lords and the remnants of the Anglo-Saxon nobility, most submitted to him after the decisive victory at Hastings. On Christmas Day, 1066, William was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey, becoming known as William the Conqueror. However, William's conquest of England was far from complete. Over the next several years, he faced numerous rebellions, particularly in the north of England, where resistance to Norman rule was strongest. William responded with brutal campaigns of suppression, most notably the Harrying of the North, in which entire regions were devastated to quell resistance. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and thousands of people were killed or left to starve. Despite these challenges, William managed to consolidate his power over England. He introduced a new aristocracy, replacing the Anglo-Saxon nobility with Norman lords loyal to him. The Norman conquest also brought about profound changes in English society, law, and culture. The feudal system was introduced, and the English language itself began to evolve as Norman French merged with Anglo-Saxon to form the basis of modern English. The Norman conquest of 1066 was a turning point in English history. It marked the end of Anglo-Saxon rule and the beginning of a new era under the Normans. William the Conqueror's victory at Hastings ensured that England would be ruled by a Norman elite for generations to come, reshaping the country's political, social, and cultural landscape. The impact of the conquest was felt not only in England, but throughout Europe. The Normans, already a powerful force in northern France, now controlled one of the most important kingdoms in Europe. This bolstered their influence in continental affairs, leading to further Norman expansion, including in southern Italy and the Holy Land during the Crusades. In England, the Norman conquest set the stage for centuries of conflict and integration between the Anglo-Saxon and Norman populations. Over time, the two groups would merge, creating a new English identity that blended elements of both cultures. But in 1066, none of this was certain. What was certain, however, was that William, Duke of Normandy, had accomplished what no one had done since the days of the Roman Empire. He had conquered England, and his legacy would endure for centuries. This victory at Hastings, despite its challenges and close calls, solidified William's place in history as William the Conqueror. The Norman conquest was not just the end of Anglo-Saxon England. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Britain, one that would echo through the ages, shaping the future of a nation that would one day rule over vast territories across the globe.